Okay. All right, good morning, everybody. We are live, and welcome to today, the 22nd, for our staff meeting. And so we're going to cover some good stuff this morning, including a special day. Our manager, it's his birthday today.
It is special.
That is very special.
Moving right along. Thank you for mentioning it. Nobody's mentioned that yet.
I know.
I appreciate that.
In case nobody knew, I wanted to go ahead and let everybody know. Okay, so happy birthday, Tom.
Thank you. We have two items.
Are we all going to sing?
No, we're not going to sing. We have.
Happy birthday. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Tom. Happy birthday to you.
Tom, I'm embarrassed for you.
Thank you. I'm just waiting for the big sombrero to come on. We have two items for staff meeting this morning. Lindsay is going to continue the conversation we had last week on mill levy scenario for reduction. And she's got some numbers put together that you should all have a copy of. And then we ran a prototype beta test on a budget simulator exercise that Nicole's going to talk with you about, that we're going to want to roll next year during the public budget discussion. And so she will cover that, plus Lindsay and Mike or other editors will tag team that subject. So Lindsay first with mill levy reduction scenarios.
Okay, good morning, Lindsay.
Good morning, Chairman.
And may I pretty please get this screen put up on that big screen? Sorry. Surprise. We're trying to see.
Yeah, it needs to be drug in the code.
Yeah. Sorry.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so what you see on screen is also in your packet. So what we've got here are the, I would say, 4 options, 3 of which were discussed with you all last week. We wanted to show you what the financial forecast looked under each of these scenarios, and we didn't want to surprise you with this tomorrow during your actual budget adoption vote. So if I can, I will walk through the summary sheet, but I will tell you, page 64 of the budget book includes what we call Scenario Builder. And so the other pages in your packet are the more detailed looks at each one of these scenarios. And in the top left of each page, you will see what the mill levy rate is that's been assumed. So if you want to dig into the details, those are the pages on which you can do that. But I'm going to stick with the summary for this discussion. So if we look at this sheet, you can see option 1 is the recommended budget as is. So that's 29.370 mils. You can see the forecasted property tax is about 182 million. And you can see until 2027 and 2028, we actually have forecasted surpluses across our 5 property tax supported funds. So as a reminder, those 5 funds that are included in this are general fund, debt service fund, aging fund, highway fund, and then of course WSU, but WSU is untouchable. But all of those are included in here. So what you can see under option 1 is that we would end the forecast term with about 102 million between all 5 of those funds. The minimum fund balance, again, that's a general fund measure, would be about 75 million. So between all 5 funds, we are in excess of that minimum by quite a bit. Now, again, that minimum is the amount where our policy says if we dip below that minimum, we have to start replenishing it. We have every quarter, we have to present a plan to replenish those dollars. So that's the minimum. It doesn't mean we're trying to get there. We want to have some money above that as a cushion. So option 2 is something that we've been talking about really since the budget was recommended. That is to reduce the overall mill levy rate by 0.25 mils. That would take your forecasted property tax down by about 1.6 million. And you can see we have a very modest surplus in 2024 across all 5 of those funds. And then we start to see some very manageable deficits in the outer years. So this is, I think Lorraine and I would both tell you this is something we would be comfortable with if this is a motion and action you took tomorrow. Option 3 was a concept to get it down just to a flat 29.0 mils. You can see that this has a pretty significant increase to the deficit right off the bat. I don't think that for now we would not encourage you to do recurring budget reductions based on these figures, but we would need to take that into account starting with the 2025 budget. So we could live with this for next year, but then we are looking at recurring budget cuts that would be necessary in the outer years. Option 4, because this deficit is so large right off the bat, we would tell you that in order to maintain the integrity of the budget, this shows a structural imbalance. And so we would want to cut at least $600,000 in recurring reductions, because we are anticipating that all of these would be recurring cuts in revenue. So we would need to cut recurring expenses in the budget. We have not identified those expenses because we do not understand necessarily what the priorities of the board are. So that would be something that we would look to you all for a little bit of direction and guidance as to how you would like to do that. But I would encourage us to have that prepared for tomorrow, if that is the will that the commission takes. Now, of course, it wouldn't be me if I didn't tell you, well, I have concerns. So those concerns are listed in line number 5. Primarily, we had more than 18 million worth of decision package requests that came through in this budget cycle from property tax funds that were not funded. And so what that means is those needs continue to exist. There's going to continue to be pressure on the budget to make sure that we can address those needs somehow. We also know that we still don't have a plan for the admin building, and we've talked about that. There's potentially going to be some debt service costs that get added in there. Or potentially, let's say we stay in this building long term and have $1 million worth of rent a year from the general fund that needs to be picked up. We'll need to factor that in as well. We know that it is very likely that a constitutional amendment is going to be on next year's presidential election, and we anticipate that will pass, and that will cap just normal day-to-day appraisal growth at 4%. Of course, if somebody expands use, changes use, if there's new property that's constructed, then we get to pick up that value. But it's not anticipated that will make a tremendous difference in that overall value growth per year. So that continues to be a large concern, starting really with the 2026 budget. We know that we now have a structural imbalance due to these expenses, and there are not one-time costs to offset that. You'll see an asterisk. That asterisk refers to line 6 below, which we'll get to in a second. But my final concern is we know that compensation isn't done. I don't expect it to be like our 8% jump last year or the 33% increases that some pay plans saw. But we know there's going to be increases. We know we're going to have to stay competitive. We know that we're going to have to keep up with what the market is doing. And unemployment is still very low, so there is still some pretty good competition. We also know Integra is coming. It's going to be 1,800 jobs. There's other economic development activities that are happening that are going to continue to place pressures on our local folks. And so while we have looked at government peers in the past for compensation, we've talked a little bit, and I think we're going to have to start looking more at what's happening in Wichita and who are we competing with locally, because we're not really necessarily competing with Johnson County or Tulsa always for positions. We're competing with the people down the street. So that's going to continue to place pressures. So I do now want to speak about number 6. So the county does have a funding cash management policy. That is actually what sets that 20% restricted minimum of 20% of your general fund and debt service budgets. It also specifically spells out how the commission may spend fund balance. And I want to point this out because a lot of what we're talking about in some of these scenarios up above point to recurring deficits. And based on the provisions in this policy, which have been a huge part of why our credit ratings have been high. It's a huge part of what auditors look at when they come and ensure that we're complying with our own policies. We say that we will only use fund balance if we need it to basically buy down the amount of debt we're going to do, if we're going to have a large risk management or work comp payment that we have to make, we can dip into that fund balance. You can see that we can do one-time expenditures that don't increase recurring cost. So let's say we want to buy a car. Well, we buy a car, but there's still recurring costs with that, right? Because we have fleet charges, we have maintenance, we have fuel that we're paying. It's not strictly a one-time expense. There are residual expenses that come with that. We can use it in the following budget cycle to increase reserves for equipment replacement. So let's say at the end of this year, we have unexpected revenues. Maybe we sell land or something and we get cash in. We can move that cash over to equipment reserves so that we have it available to us in future years, which is great, especially under the new state law. And then we can use it as startup expenditures for a new program. So, for example, ICT-1, when we started that program, that was an acceptable use of fund balance. So while we see these deficits, it is, and we see that we are above our estimated ending fund balance, because these are for recurring expenses, we can't just eat up the fund balance. That is not acceptable under this policy, and it would potentially cause us issues with our credit rating, which we get evaluated every year whether we're issuing debt or not by all three credit rating agencies. So not necessarily the most fun topic of conversation, but certainly important to know as you go into your deliberations tomorrow. I'm in support of 2. I can live with 3 as long as we're all prepared to start making cuts next year. 4 is going to be troublesome for the level of service unless commissioners are prepared to accept a reduction somewhere. So, what questions do you have for me?
Probably some questions, but Lindsay, thank you and your staff, Lori, and everybody. This is so helpful for all of us as we've had this discussion, and I think this spells out stuff. And thanks for explaining the balances above the minimum fund balance. That's a really helpful information. We all kind of know it, but in black and white is really good, and in red sometimes.
Yeah, the red's less fun.
All right, so any questions about this?
I do, Chairman. Yeah. Thank you,
Commissioner Beatty.
Lindsay. Chief, very well done. The forecast models, you're using 4% for property tax.
Next year actually is 4.5%, and then
4.5.
4% in 26 and beyond.
What are you using for sales tax? What?
I believe we've got that around 4%, Lorian? Yes.
So the only way we correct this is some growth, correct? I mean, that's the only way that those deficits, if we, option 3, option 4, we'd have to, barring cuts, we'd have to grow ourselves out of this, correct?
Yes.
Sales tax has represented what, 15, 18% of our total budget, or?
On the tax side, yes.
So it's a big number.
It is about 40 million, but again, half of that may only go toward road and bridge, so that
Right,
about
the other
20
half
million
is-
of that actually supports this budget.
We need our retailer to get going, huh?
Yeah, go spend money. I'm doing my part. Bought a house and a car, so.
Anyway, that you make a good point. So a little bit of the unknown is any increase in sales tax revenue.
Yes,
And-
although.
and we don't know the new construction world, but comes in the outer years.
Right.
Somebody builds something this year, it's not in the 24 world. It'll be in the 25 start.
Right, and if
On
you, I might encourage commissioners to flip to page 2.
Okay.
And what you can see across the bottom in row 30 is the actual percentage change of assessed value. So again, 4% and 4.5%. 4.5% are actually pretty good compared to where we've been historically. So I'm not super optimistic that we would be a lot far above that based on, although Mark can correct me if I'm wrong, it seems as though the housing and the real estate market has slowed a bit based on what we're seeing in register of deeds, mortgage records, and everything that we get sent each month. So I would love to believe that it's going to continue to be at this very high pace from a government perspective, but I am sure citizens would like it if it would stop.
You know, Lindsay, you make a good point, and I don't want to, Mr. Clark, I don't want to put you on the spot, but do you get feedback about projections in future years? Or you want to come up and comment on any of this, please? I'm kind of putting you on there. I didn't intend to. but
Well, and
you
he
do
will
make a
give
good
us
point.
projections. Typically, we wait till later in the year to get them for the next year's
Yeah.
budget process,
Well,
but it is.
Well, I'm kind of convenient.
But we'll
I
let
mean,
him talk
I'm-
about that on the record.
I'm familiar that you do projections on a current year world. I don't know if your state meetings and if they
We
have any
don't do
prediction on-
perspective because that is something that USPAP restricts us against. We don't do that.
Oh, it does? Okay.
Yes. We look at what the market is currently doing, and we do what ifs, but we usually don't release those because those are extremely hypothetical.
Yeah.
And so, when you look at it, Lindsay's correct. Volume is down, sales volume's down, but sale prices are remaining very high. And so there's still some resilience there in that market. And the imbalance that I talk about frequently in the residential market is still very, very strong.
All right. Any questions for Mark?
Yep.
Okay.
Thanks, Mark. When do those projections come out? When do you start doing these things for 24? I'm just curious timetable because.
We aren't going to release anything until January.
Okay. That's helpful. That's an idea.
Because, the statutory date
That's it.
is January 1.
There are a lot of statutory things that govern your job, correct?
Absolutely.
Because across the street, they're making some assumptions about your job and our role that are,
Right.
are unfounded.
And so, we're out there and we're data collecting now. We're doing analysis, doing all sorts of things in preparation for those 2024 values.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions regarding this information? Again, it's very, very valuable for me, at least.
And we will have motions prepared tomorrow. Lorian has already put those together. I know Justin has seen the bulk of them.
Okay.
So we'll be ready to roll with whatever you want to throw out at us. We will have Levy Live up, if you remember that Excel document where we track your motions and your changes. So we will have that going tomorrow. So
Okay.
I guess do your worst.
Okay.
Or not.
Is there any other?
Or not, but
So on this item, is there any other questions? Brandy, other elected? Okay. All right. See any? Okay, thank you.
Okay, Nicole.
Good morning, everyone. I wanted to let you know we did a pilot this year for a budget simulator. It's something that finance has been talking about for a while, and we've been looking for opportunities to get public feedback. So we decided to pilot internally. Just so that you know, this is an example we took from the city. They do have a budget simulator, and so we looked into it, and it felt like it was a good fit. We did run the internal simulator from July 21st through August 11th for staff. We had over 600 responses, and balancing out, that's about 18% of our workforce. So I was very pleased with that return. Along with that feedback, it was slider scales. They could choose what was most important to them and what they didn't feel was most important. They also got the opportunity to comment. And the comments included, a lot of them were thank you for this opportunity for the feedback. And we like being able to share what our thoughts are on the budget. There were other comments on staffing, elections, public safety, the website redesign, all over the board. And we are looking to roll this out publicly for the 2025 budget process. And I can answer any questions you might have.
Thanks, Nicole. I refrained from responding because I assumed that I should have asked. You probably didn't want. Are those responses, are they identified by the person?
No, they are not identified by the person. It's all anonymous.
Okay, all right. So I guess any of us could have responded, but out of respect to the rest, I just. Okay. Any other questions about that? Thank you. This is a good tool. Okay. I don't see any other questions on that.
That's all we had. Just a reminder, I think all of you are going, the county is being recognized for our diversity efforts, and there's a celebration today at noon. So I think you're all
Right. I have a conflict. I'm going to probably be late to that, but I assume you all can. I think it's an award and a photograph opportunity. It's not, we're not speaking at that, are we? Or are we? Okay, all right, good. Okay. That's fine.
I know the Child Advocacy Center is also being recognized. When I was going through the business stuff.
Yeah, that's
That's
right.
another organization in Sedgwick County.
Will you all each check in? I'm going to go to the Farm and Food to Farm Council is having their first meeting today, so I'm going to go to Rockford and kick that off. Sorry? No, I'm good.
It is food and farm,
But they're not feeding there, which
What?
It's a 1 o'clock meeting, so, you know,
I can't believe having a food and farm council and there's no
doing the people's work, Chairman.
Take some broccoli or something. Okay.
Can I say
yeah,
one?
Commissioner Howe.
I watched the Johnson County hearing last night. A couple of things about that. Number one, it's interesting they had a hearing in the evening, and they don't plan to adopt their budget until the 31st of August, which I thought was interesting. So I like the fact that they did it that way. The fact that the hearing is after the revenue neutral rate notices were sent out, and it's evening hearing. Those are desirables. I'm still going to say I wish we had done it that way. But for some reason, they're able to do the hearing yesterday and have the adoption on August 31st.
Did they do their revenue neutral rate hearing or just their public budget hearing?
This is they've already voted prior to this to exceed the revenue neutral rate. That was a 5-2 vote. That happened a few weeks back, or maybe a month
Right, and
ago.
you all did the same thing, which
Right.
is what produced this, but then you all will actually tomorrow have at the end of your public hearing, you'll vote to approve a resolution that says we intend to exceed the revenue neutral rate. And so we treat the public budget hearing and the revenue neutral rate hearing as the same thing, but every government is required to have both. So I'm just curious which one that was.
They did
last
vote
night.
at the end of the night, last
Okay.
night. And again, maybe I'm conflating two things here, but adopting the budget and then I guess going through that public hearing and adopting that resolution, maybe they separated the two. Maybe that's what they're talking about. But one other point about this is I think last year they had 2 people speak at their budget hearing, and this last night they had 2 hours worth of people who spoke, and it was extremely emotional for a lot of people there. So I would anticipate we will see some people here tomorrow, and we ought to prepare ourselves for a longer meeting tomorrow. I wouldn't plan to go anywhere for lunch at noon. I don't think it's not reasonable. I'd say clear your schedule, because I think we'll see probably a much better response in terms of from the public maybe we have in the past at this point. So, thank you.
And Chairman, is it okay if I make a couple comments about tomorrow?
I think it's okay. Yeah. I
Okay.
just look for approval. I think you got approval.
Okay, so just a quick reminder that we are preparing motions now for anyone who has things. Any change at all from the recommended has to be voted on. And so if there's anything that has caught your eye in the last 6 weeks that you want to change, it is not as simple as just kind of talking about that. We actually have to have a motion to make that adjustment. So if you have something and you'd like us to prepare a motion for you, we're happy to do it. But I just want to make sure it's clear that every one of those changes has to be voted on via a motion. Thank you. Okay, I'm done. Sorry.
Thank you. Okay. Anything else? Comments? Okay. Then we will stand adjourned on this staff meeting, and we'll see everybody at 11 o'clock tomorrow morning. 9 o'clock, 9 o'clock. Okay. And happy birthday, Mr. Manager.
Happy birthday.
The mayor of Keachai just texted me, says happy birthday.